Hey there, welcome back to my kitchen. Today I'm excited to share this meatless meals video with you. I've had a couple people ask me if I could make a meatless meals video, so I do hope you enjoy this and find a recipe or two that looks good to you. So let's go ahead and get started. Kicking off today's video, we're making some meatless ricotta and mushroom calzones. I am just going to preheat my oven to 400 degrees, and then I'm just chopping up half of a yellow onion and slicing up about 6 ounces of mushrooms. I do remove the stems, but feel free to leave them in there if you like them. Over to a skillet, I heated up a little bit of olive oil in there, and now I'm just going to be cooking my mushroom and onion in there. I am also going to be seasoning this with about a 1/4 teaspoon of garlic powder, a 1/4 teaspoon of oregano, a few shakes of salt and pepper. You can always add more of salt and pepper later. And then once my mushroom and onion are getting close to being done, I'm going to add in about a 1/4 cup of frozen spinach, and I'm just going to let this heat up in there while the mushroom and onion finish up. Once those are tender, I'm just going to go ahead and set them aside for right now. I did have a slight mishap with this pizza dough. It is a canned pizza dough, and the day before it had popped open, and I tried to save it by wrapping it in plastic wrap, but ultimately it did dry out a little bit. I did make it work, but it was a little bit hard to work with. With the canned pizza dough, you just want to split that into 4 equal sections, and then you'll want to make this into a circle. Like I said, if this was a fresh can, it would stretch a little better, but mine was slightly dried out, so I just stretched it the best I could. In the very bottom on one side, I'm adding just a little bit of mozzarella cheese, about a tablespoon or so of pizza sauce. You don't want to add too much in there, a spoonful of our mushroom, onion, and spinach. And then I'm just going to add a couple dollops of this ricotta cheese. When filling this, just be careful not to add too much, that way you can get it closed in the end. On top of the ricotta, I'm adding just a little bit more of that mozzarella cheese, and then we're going to fold this top part over and pinch the edges together to seal that up. As I get these calzones filled up, I'm just going to put them over on a lined baking sheet. Using parchment paper will help them to come off the pan a lot easier. In this bowl, I have 1 beaten egg to make an egg wash, and I'm just going to add this over top of each one of these. Before adding these into the oven, just make sure you take a very sharp knife and add 3 slits into the top of each one of these. Doing this will help it to vent and cook more evenly. Now you can just stick those in your oven to bake for about 12 to 15 minutes. Just be sure to keep an eye on them. Once they are nice and golden brown, they are good to go. Here's what my finished plate looked like in the end. I just served this with a little tiny bowl of pizza sauce with some Parmesan cheese on the top for added flavor. Overall, these were delicious, and I would absolutely make them again. And I was really surprised that my husband liked them as much as he did. Up next, we're going to be making this grilled cheese sandwich with some homemade tomato Parmesan soup. In my smaller crock pot today, I am halving the recipe just because there is only 2 of us. I'm adding in 1 can of diced tomatoes, 1 can of chicken broth, half a cup of chopped celery, half of a yellow onion chopped, half a cup of shredded carrots, half a teaspoon of oregano, half a teaspoon of basil. And then I'm just going to give this a quick mix together, and on the very top of this, you're going to add in 1 bay leaf, Now I'm just adding on my lid and letting this cook on a low heat for about 4 hours. At that point, everything should be nice and tender. Before doing anything else, be sure to remove that bay leaf. And then for this next part, we're actually going to be using an immersion blender. I'm going to blend this until it's nice and smooth, but if you don't have an immersion blender, you can just add this into a regular blender and that will work just as well. In this little bowl, I do have 3 tablespoons of cornstarch. I'm going to take a little bit of this soup and add it into this bowl, that way I can mix this all together really well. And then once it's mixed up, you can go ahead and pour the whole thing back into the soup. This cornstarch is really just going to make this soup even thicker. Next, I'm just adding in 3 tablespoons of butter. This will only take a minute to completely melt into this soup, and then you'll want to add in 3/4 of a cup of freshly shredded Parmesan cheese and 1 cup of half and half. Make sure to mix that up really well and just double check that none of that Parmesan cheese kind of balled up in the soup anywhere. At this point, after the cheese has melted, you can go ahead and give it a taste. Make sure that you adjust your salt and pepper, and if you think it needs any more basil or oregano, go ahead and add that as well. Now I'm just going to let this soup sit here for a few minutes while I go ahead and finish dinner and make these grilled cheese sandwiches. Over to my griddle, I'm just adding 2 pieces of buttered white bread, but you can use any bread that you like. On each slice of bread, I'm adding 1 slice of Havarti cheese, and then on top of that, I'm adding 1 slice of Gouda, and then last but not least, 1 slice of mild cheddar. Of course, you'll just want to brown these up on both sides. I like to cook mine on a low heat, that way the cheese can melt down nice and slow and melt all the way through. This is what it'll look like when it's done. Look how cheesy this turns out to be. It's just simply one of the best cheese combinations, I think. I also like going simple sometimes and will just use Velveeta or American cheese, but if you want to go with a little bit more high quality of a cheese, this is a great combination. Here's what my soup looked like in the end. I did just add a little bit more Parmesan on top. This soup is a great recipe to hide vegetables from your kids as well. And then I, of course, just dip my sandwich in the soup, but this combination is so good, perfect for the upcoming colder months. Now we're going to be making this white macaroni and cheese bake, and let me tell you, this is one of those recipes that my husband gets really excited about when he knows I'm going to be making it. The very first thing I did was preheat my oven to 375 degrees, and then over to a pot of boiling water, I added in 10 ounces of pasta. Over to a pot on my stove, I am going to melt down 2 tablespoons of butter. Once melted, I'm adding in a half tablespoon of minced garlic. And then I'm also adding a couple shakes of salt and pepper, but just a little for right now. We're going to add more later. Now I'm just going to let this garlic cook for about 30 seconds to a minute before adding in 2 tablespoons of all-purpose flour. Get that mixed up really well, and you'll just want to let this cook for about a minute or 2, kind of let it get a golden color to it. Once nice and thick, I'm slowly going to start adding in my half and half. In my measuring cup, I have 1 1/4 cups of half and half. You'll just mix that together until it's nice and thick. Once that is nice and thick, you'll just want to add in 1/8 of a teaspoon of nutmeg. Now in this bowl I do have 3 separate cheeses. I have 3 ounces of freshly shredded sharp white cheddar cheese, 6 ounces of freshly shredded Gouda cheese, and then 2 ounces of freshly shredded Parmesan cheese. Slowly you're going to start adding this in and mixing it up until all of it has completely melted down. Just be sure to save about a half cup of this cheese. Once that's all completely mixed together, you can go ahead and add in your pasta and just get that completely mixed together. Moving over to my cutting board, I do have an 8x8 casserole pan here. I'm going to add in that entire pot of macaroni and cheese, spread it around as evenly as you can. Now take that remaining cheese that you have and just sprinkle that right over the top. And then you'll want to take some plain breadcrumbs and just sprinkle that over top of everything. I hardly used 1/4 of a cup, you really don't need too much. And then last but not least, I'm adding on just a little bit of dried parsley over the top. That's just going to kind of melt into that top crust. And then bake in the oven for about 15 minutes, and I did turn broil on for about 2 minutes just to darken up that cheese on the top. Here is what my finished plate looked like. This macaroni and cheese is so delicious, definitely one of our favorites to have. And then on the side, I just made some garlic knots and then a broccoli and cauliflower mix. Last but not least, I tried out this Ricotta Orzo. I will link the original recipe down below for you. She made it all in the oven. I'm gonna make it all in one pot on the stovetop. But what I did was start by cutting up about 6 ounces of mushrooms and then half of a red bell pepper. I also chopped up half of a yellow onion. And now over to my stove, I am adding about a tablespoon of olive oil into my pot. I let that heat up and now I'm adding in the mushrooms, the bell pepper, and the onion in here. I'm going to let this cook for about 7 minutes until they are all nice and tender. Now I'm adding in 1 teaspoon of minced garlic. Again, just going to let this cook for about 30 more seconds until that garlic is smelling nice and strong. Next, I'm adding in half a teaspoon of dried basil and half a teaspoon of parsley, as well as a half a teaspoon of salt. I'm also adding in a 1/4 cup of frozen spinach and 1 can of fire roasted diced tomatoes. I am just going to give this a quick mix together and get all of that combined. Next, I'm adding in 1½ cups of chicken broth and 1 cup of orzo. This orzo has not been cooked yet, it's going to cook right here in this pot. I gave that a good stir and I'm going to let this come to a simmer. Give it one more good mix together and then add the lid and let this cook on a low to medium heat until the orzo is cooked all the way through. Also, at that point, most of the liquid should be gone out of your pan. Now I'm adding in 3/4 of a cup of ricotta cheese. Make sure you mix that up really well. If you don't like ricotta, you could skip the ricotta. You might just have to substitute with a little bit of something else. And I tasted this, thought it needed a little bit more seasonings, so I added a little bit of garlic powder, salt, and pepper to taste. Also, it is optional. You can add some red pepper flakes like I did, but if you want to skip that, you totally can. To finish this off over the top, I'm adding about 1 cup of shredded mozzarella cheese, and I'm just going to let that melt down. Here is what my finished bowl looked like. I just added some more parsley and red pepper flakes on the top of this. I actually really enjoyed this. I almost think it would be good with Cajun seasoning. My husband thought it was okay, but it was a lot of vegetables and we all know he's super picky. But overall, I really enjoyed this. Thank you so much for watching today's video. I really hope you enjoyed. Be sure to leave me a flower down in the comments, and I will see you guys back here on Sunday. Bye!